It was supposed to be routine. That's the thing nobody really talks about when they tell this story. By April of 1970, Americans had already walked on the moon twice. The excitement, the pure shock of watching Neil Armstrong take that first step, all of that was already fading. Apollo 13 was, in the eyes of most people, just another mission. CBS didn't even bother airing the crew's live broadcast from space. Not enough people were watching, so they cut it. Nobody was paying attention, and then everything went wrong. Apollo 13 launched on April 11, 1970. The crew was 3 men: Jim Lovell, the commander, a veteran who had already orbited the moon on Apollo 8; Jack Swigert, the command module pilot, a last-minute replacement who joined the crew just days before launch; and Fred Haise, making his very first spaceflight. They were headed for a region of the moon called Fra Mauro, carrying the hopes of a nation that had already stopped watching. The first 2 days were completely normal, boring even. The crew ran checks, floated around the cabin, cracked jokes over the radio. At one point, Swigert mentioned he'd forgotten to file his taxes before launch. NASA actually had to get him a deadline extension from the IRS. That really happened. These guys were relaxed, loose, confident. There was a comfort to how they moved through those first days, a familiarity that only comes from years of training. Nothing felt dangerous. Nothing felt uncertain. This was supposed to be the easy part of the space age, the part where you just follow the checklist and everything works out. Then came the evening of April 13th, 55 hours and 55 minutes into the mission, 200,000 miles from Earth. Mission Control asked Swigert to do something completely routine: stir the oxygen tanks. A 5-second task, the kind of thing you do without thinking. He flipped the switch, and the entire spacecraft shook. Jim Lovell heard the bang first, not a small sound you could explain away. A loud, violent bang that reverberated through the hull and into the bones of everyone on board. Warning lights erupted across the control panel. Systems started failing one by one. And then Swigert picked up the radio and said the words that would echo through history. "Houston, we've had a problem." What had happened was catastrophic. Oxygen tank number 2, located in the service module just behind the command module, had exploded. Not leaked, not malfunctioned in some manageable way. Exploded. A violent rupture that sent shockwaves through the hull and blew an entire panel off the side of the spacecraft. And the blast hadn't just destroyed Tank 2, it damaged Tank 1 as well. Both tanks were now venting their liquid oxygen into the void of space, bleeding out into the darkness with nothing anyone could do to stop it. Here's what made this so devastating. Those tanks didn't just supply oxygen to breathe. They powered the fuel cells that generated electricity for the entire spacecraft. Navigation, communication, life support, the computers, everything that kept 3 human beings alive 200,000 miles from home. The command module had maybe 15 minutes of battery power left. The spacecraft was dying. Back in Houston, Flight Director Gene Kranz took control immediately. He gathered his team and made one thing clear: they were going to find a way to bring those 3 men home. Failure was not an option, not a slogan, a decision. The only path forward was the lunar module, that small, spidery spacecraft attached to the front of the command module, designed to land 2 astronauts on the moon for 45 hours. would now have to keep 3 people alive for 90 hours in deep space. It had never been built for this. Nobody had ever tested this. There was no manual for what came next. Engineers at Mission Control worked with a desperation that's hard to describe. The problems kept coming, one after another. Carbon dioxide was building up inside the lunar module. The scrubber canisters that removed it from the air were running out. The command module had extra canisters, but they were square. The lunar module's system took round ones, completely incompatible. So engineers designed an adapter on the spot, using only what they knew was on the spacecraft. Cardboard from a checklist cover, duct tape, a plastic bag, and a sock. A literal sock. They built a prototype on the ground, then read the instructions to the crew over the radio, step by step. It worked. Then there was the cold. To save power for re-entry, the crew shut down nearly every system in the spacecraft. Lights, heaters, everything that drew current. The temperature inside dropped to 38 degrees Fahrenheit, just above freezing. Condensation formed on the walls, on the windows, on every metal surface. Water droplets clung to the instruments. The astronauts' breath misted in front of their faces. They couldn't sleep. The cold made it almost impossible. They huddled together, trying to conserve body heat, wearing every layer they had, shivering in the dark. Fred Haise developed a urinary tract infection from the cold and the stress. He was running a fever, sick and exhausted and in pain, floating in a freezing, broken spacecraft with no proper medical care and no real way to rest. Jim Lovell later described looking out the window at Earth, that tiny, impossibly beautiful blue circle hanging in the darkness. So far away, it looked like something you could cover with your thumb. And genuinely not knowing in those quiet, freezing hours whether he was going to see it up close again, whether he was going to make it back to his family, whether this was how it ended. The journey back took 4 agonizing days, and then came re-entry, the part that gets overlooked. The angle of entry into the atmosphere had to be almost impossibly precise. Too shallow and you bounce off into space forever. Too steep and you burn up. The explosion had changed the spacecraft's weight distribution. Nobody was certain the heat shield, which had been sitting in freezing space for 4 days, hadn't cracked. On top of that, the crew had to power the command module back up using procedures written from scratch just hours before. Under normal circumstances, this was a 3-month process. They had 2 hours they did it. On April 17, 1970, the Apollo 13 command module splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. For a few agonizing seconds, the parachutes weren't visible. Then they appeared, orange and white against the blue sky. The capsule hit the water. Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Haise were alive. Church bells rang across Europe. In America, people who'd been glued to their televisions for 4 days finally exhaled. Gene Kranz called it NASA's finest hour. Not the moon landing. This broken mission that never reached its destination. Because here's the thing, Apollo 11 proved that human beings could do the impossible when everything went right. Apollo 13 proved something harder, that we could do it when everything went wrong, when the oxygen bled into space and the cold crept in. And there was no manual, no precedent, nothing but a room full of engineers who refused to quit and 3 men in a freezing capsule who trusted them. The mission failed. They never landed on the moon, but those 3 men came home. And sometimes that's the most extraordinary thing of all.